Callisto Protocol is a crushing disappointment, but in the worst possible way. There is potential and groundwork here for something truly mind-blowing, but the Callisto Protocol isn't it. It's built on the basis of one of the best realised in-game universes I've ever witnessed, just in regards to the sheer graphical fidelity. However, it fell apart where it mattered most, and that is during the gameplay. If Striking Distance Studio gave as much attention to the gameplay and combat mechanics as they did the stunning recreation of a colony on Europa, we would have had an all-time classic on our hands and something that could hold up to the legendary status of Dead Space. Instead, we've got some of the most frustrating and repetitive gameplay I have experienced in recent times. It's so badly implemented that me and many other players had to lower the difficulty down to easy just so we could get through the game and get it done with. There is a litany of design decisions throughout the game that really leave the experience feeling like a beautifully hollow shell of a game. If you played this game just for a few hours, I'd forgive you for thinking it's going to be phenomenal, but complete the full game and ultimately the flaws really begin to show the more you get into the game. To be honest, Callisto Protocol feels more like a tech demo for reasons I'm going to expand on. If you're coming in here expecting an incredible survival horror experience, well, sadly, this isn't that. If you are wanting some kind of course on the art of the Philly shell defense used by Floyd Mayweather in his illustrious boxing career, well, actually you might be closer to the right place. Anyway, with that being said, let's get lost in the world of shadowboxing on Europa. It's fair to say that Callisto Protocol is one of the most impressive video games I have ever seen. Yes, it's partly due to the closed linear environments which allow for high levels of detail to be used in every nook and cranny of Callisto's many levels, but I'm not going to hold that against it because holy shit, Callisto Protocol is visually gobsmacking. It's easily one of the most photorealistic games I've ever seen. It's just ridiculous. The graphical fidelity on show throughout every minute of this game is genuinely mind-blowing.
Elias! Elias!
I think we are now really beginning to see what this next generation of consoles is capable of, and graphics cards as well, with God of War Ragnarok and then this. And there's so many moments during the playthrough of Callisto Protocol that will take your breath away, like genuinely, not just like cliche take your breath away, I'm talking about genuinely take your breath away. It is staggering what they've achieved here. And that goes for everything, by the way, when it comes to the visual and audio delivery, the voice acting, the cutscenes, the animations, the lighting, the sound, the music. Honestly, it just slaps from beginning to end. There is a foundation of something truly special here, and it looks and sounds so incredible. You just can't help but feel hyped the moment you load this game and you load into those first levels. Sadly though, the outer shell of this game is the high point. Nothing else about Callisto Protocol gets in the same universe as the visual splendor that is this prison block on Europa. The death animations are graphic and grotesque, and they're absolutely brilliant, by the way, but they do end up getting a bit annoying because sadly they're going to be intrinsically linked to the poor gameplay which leads to so many deaths. So sadly, mentally, you're going to make a link with these death animations with poor gameplay implementation, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Voice acting is excellent. The lead, Josh Duhamel, I hope I'm saying that right, is absolutely fantastic as the main protagonist. Sam Witwer as one of the bad guys, criminally underused, is also excellent, and both are sensational on screen. Honestly, it could easily be mistaken for a film at times. It is on an incredible level. I briefly mentioned the sound and the music earlier. I'm going to touch on that in the story and narrative section when we start talking about horror and whether or not Callisto Protocol invokes horror. But the kind of ambient sounds that run in the background, the haunting, like blaring horns that come out at certain points, the rattling of the enemies and the pipework around you, all do create a very tense atmosphere. Maybe not quite a scary or horror-based atmosphere, but definitely it feels tense. But quite frankly, the lighting and graphics quality are the driving forces behind everything you feel in Callisto Protocol. Whenever it looks this good, it's hard not to be fully immersed, especially with the complete lack of HUD or UI like the original Dead Space, which just increases that immersion. I was completely engrossed. Well, until I had to fight anything. Halfway through, it's pretty apparent that Callisto Protocol has shown you everything it's got in terms of fear factor. So that actual fear factor is non-existent. If you know what's coming, there's nothing to fear. Without trying to sound crass, one of the most terrifying or scary things in the game is the thought that you might have to engage in melee combat. More on that in a minute. Exceptional music creates a tension-filled atmosphere. The game plays and feels more like an action thriller than a horror game. The spectre of Dead Space loomed large over Callisto, but I do wonder if the devs ever actually aimed to replicate it, or if it was just marketing hype. I know there's been performance issues on the PC that have been well documented by now. I played on the PlayStation 5. I had no issues other than in the last two levels where there was some frame drops to 30 FPS. I had a slight sound issue. I say slight, it was pretty regular, where the sounds from my gunshots would clip out and I just end up with like a water pistol sound. It was, you know what, I managed to blank it out, to be honest, for most of it. I had one crash on the PlayStation 5, but that's it, all to report. Other than that, honestly, it was a pretty flawlessly beautiful experience. You know, just to sum up the audiovisual spectacle that is Callisto Protocol, it's just a jaw-dropping feast for the senses. Highly immersive, incredible attention to detail, and like I said before, just another glimpse into what we can expect in this new generation.
Hey, you freelancers out here.
I was just doing my job.
Don't I know it?
Thermal regulators enabled.
First ship I ever lost. We were boarded by...
Let go of me!
She's the one who... Hey! Hold your chance, cargo jockey. You do your job. You let me do mine, huh? Sir. Yes, sir? Whatever you say. Grab him, too. Hey! What are you doing? Hey! I didn't do anything!
Now, as mentioned earlier, the biggest criticism of Callisto Protocol is that it's just not scary. Game from the makers of Dead Space, leaning into the Dead Space name in the build-up. You would think instilling fear in the player would be the foundation of the whole experience, but sadly it is not. Yes, there's a tense energy about the game, but never horror. The constant use of the same jump scares give diminishing returns, and quickly. Oh, fuck me! What the fuck, bro? Holy fucking shit.
2 hours later.
What the fuck, man? Stupid thing is you can't... Oh, what the fuck? I'm fucking pressing it. It's just a gauntlet of shit just jumping in your face. What the hell?
3 hours later.
You ready? Pow! There you go. Told you. Told you. You're like, oh! The next second, oh! Oh! What the fuck? Over-reliance on these jump scares means it never truly builds any true horror. Maybe because they felt they were building it through the jump scares. It's not scary if you face the same 4 enemies for the whole game. It's not scary if you face the same attack, which by the way is a left hook and a right hook, for 12 hours. It's not scary if you face the same 2 jump scares 30 times. So the story is quite basic, and it's basically done just to kind of be a vehicle for which to drive the game forward. The cutscenes, however, like I mentioned previously, are excellent. They absolutely drive the narrative forward. To be honest, with this engine, I'm certain you could put in Dr. Dolittle 7 and it would probably make the movie 10 times better. There are some glaring plot holes with the story, but I gotta be honest, with the level of immersion the game creates due to how good it looks, it kind of gets away with it. Like, I was engrossed in the game, I was engrossed in the main character, I wanted to know what happens. The kind of plot twist towards the end is a bit silly, but whatever. It's, you know, to be honest, if Resident Evil can get away with stupid stuff, you know, we should let Callisto Protocol get away with it as well, I guess. But yeah, the story's okay. You won't remember the story in a week. Let's just put it like that. But it's fine. It's serviceable. It does its job. It gives us a kind of jumping off point, a jumping off platform for the game and the series. Now, there are some kind of cheesy, corny bits in it which just don't work. They attempt to like forcibly inject emotion into the game in certain scenes, but they don't develop the emotional connection between the 2 characters enough to really make it mean anything. And in fact, it just ends up looking a bit stupid. Also, the lack of time given to certain characters means their sudden kind of shunting into the limelight just comes across as bizarre, quite honestly. Cinematically though, Protocol is glorious. Not due to a particularly gripping script or anything, but just due to the hyper-realism, the fantastic voice acting, the brilliant lighting, and the use of kind of really spine-tingling sounds and blaring horns or drums and things, along with the lighting, and it all just comes together to create a very tense atmosphere. And for the first hour or 2, you'll be totally blown away by this. I mean, you'll be thinking this is going to be a classic, a 9 out of 10 game, but sadly things do go downhill the longer you play the game. All in all though, the story is passable, but absolutely catapulted to probably greater heights than it really should be for such a basic story due to the incredible visual fidelity. That is the vehicle that does all the heavy lifting for a very simple and standard story. It's stupid. Fuck. It's just so It's just so long, dude. Holy shit. Bang, 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 dead, transform, bang, 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 dead, new enemy, bang, bang, transform. Oh my god. Okay, so you might want to grab some coffee for this one, because holy hell, the flow of the combat and the flow of the game in Callisto Protocol is bad. Like, top tier bad. Let's just break it down quickly. Poor repetitive combat, terrible camera versus more than one enemy, awful weapon swap mechanics, horrendously slow healing animation, weird lock-on, bullet sponge enemies, awkward hit detection, terrible level layout, counterintuitive inventory management in relation to the level design. The list goes on and on. I'll be reeling off a list of more as we go through this. If I went into deep detail on every single thing, we'd be here for hours. But quite simply, if you're going to give a game a good mark in review, as far as I'm concerned, it has to play well. It's like watching a great movie. It has to have somewhat decent acting, right? You can't have a movie that you're going to say is going to, I don't know, go for an Oscar and the acting's awful. It's just not going to happen, because it ruins the essence of what it is. And the same here goes with gameplay for a video game, and it's why Callisto Protocol, I've seen some reviewers give Callisto Protocol 9. That is absolutely baffling to me. That person either hasn't played the game for more than an hour, or has received a nice brown paper bag under their desk and has given it a 9. Anyway, moving on. First issue in this game is combat. Now, if the melee combat worked, if it even was tweaked slightly to make it borderline enjoyable, this game would really, it would be fine. You'd find it, you could recommend this game if just the melee combat was decent, it worked, but it doesn't, so yeah, you know where this is going. Anyway, combat. First thing first, the combat is flat out broken. In horror games, you can avoid fights. You cannot avoid fights in this game. It's just not possible. You have to fight everything. And for 80% of this game, 90% of this game, you just don't have enough ammo to shoot things. So your main weapon is your electrified metal pole. Now the issue here is you only have one combo for a large chunk of the game. And to be honest, I mean, you do have one combo for the whole game. After that, you do get a heavy attack, which is R1. But yeah, that's it. And you receive one combo from the enemy, which is generally one hook, then another hook, and then you get a chance to hit back. Now, 90% of the time you're facing more than one enemy, and it's at this point the combat falls apart. Clearly a choice was made to move away from Dead Space's more gun-focused combat and go to a melee and dodge-based system. It's a choice that has rendered the game frustrating to play. Insanely so. The implementation of the melee system is so scuffed and monotonous that it feels like a punishment when you see an enemy. And I'll be honest, by the time I got to like 60% through this game, 70% through this game, when I saw a bunch of enemies, I just rolled my eyes. Melee combat is for all intents and purposes a turn-based system, but only for the enemy you're facing. All the other enemies are in a do what the hell you want whenever you feel like it kind of system, and you and the one guy you're looking at are in a turn-based system. Yeah, I know, it's as good as it sounds. The whole combat boils down to this. If you're looking at an enemy and they swing an arm at you, you hold left, and by the way, you don't have to time it. You can actually close your eyes and just hold left and he will dodge. And then when you hear swing and dodge, you then just hold right, keep your eyes closed, and you'll automatically dodge the next one. That is the whole dodging system in this game. No timing, just holding a stick. Now it looks great. If you were to clip it to TikTok, you'd be like, oh wow, that combat looks really fluid. It plays terribly. Once the enemy has done their 1-2 punch, you then get your opportunity to swing your metal stick at their head. That probably sounds like I'm lying about this, so here's a clip to sum it up nicely. Two or more enemies, the gameplay simply disintegrates. You can only dodge the enemy the game has locked you onto. And by the way, there is no targeting system, so just pray to God it locks you onto the correct enemy. What if you aren't locked onto the correct enemy? Well, you're probably dead, very dead, which is why I'm saying play easy mode, because at least on easy mode you can survive the ridiculous camera. And why are you dead? Because, my friends, this is the healing animation in the game, which you, by the way, can get knocked out of. So, yeah. So just to be clear, if you're attacked by an enemy you are not locked onto, which by the way the computer chooses which enemy you lock onto, you will get hit in the face and probably killed. It's outrageously bad design. Now what I've just described is about 80% of the combat in the whole game. In the final 20% of the game you do get more ammo, you do get more inventory space eventually, and you can shoot your way through a lot of the problems. Again, on easy mode, it's a bit easier because the enemies aren't so ridiculously spongy. But even that's tough because if you have a lot of enemies and you need to do a quick swap, well, here's the quick swap animation. I'm going to talk about this in a second. The quick swap is so bad. It just literally doesn't make any sense. It's so badly implemented. Quick swap has been in games for about 20 years. Why they couldn't just copy and paste another quick swap is beyond me. But anyway, moving on. Now you'll die a lot in Callisto Protocol, and I'd say 90% of those deaths will be complete and utter bullshit. Honestly, would highly recommend playing on easy, enjoying the game for what it is, a cinematic experience with incredible visual fidelity, fantastic voice acting, excellent cutscenes and animations, and a story that's, you know, you want to see where it goes just because it looks so good in all honesty. Now again, another weird thing is stealth. They introduced stealth early in the game. You get to use stealth for like 3 encounters. I don't get it. But to be honest, when they use stealth at the end, you're actually thankful because the melee is so mind-numbingly bad that you're just delighted that there's something else you can do rather than have to melee people with this ridiculous dodge combo. Now, an easy fix for this would have been to increase inventory size early, allow for more upgrades, more ammo, more guns earlier in the game, which would have taken the pressure off the melee combat system, or just completely redo the melee system into something much more interactive, much more engaging rather than what it is. Reduce the health of the enemies. In fact, you just have to change the whole bloody thing. Anyway, moving on to the next issue for the game flow, which is inventory. Let's talk about inventory. Inventory management has always been a thing in survival horror games, and I do feel like they tried to do it here, but the other systems they have tied into the inventory just make it ridiculous. The inventory management is just too stringent. They're obviously trying to inject a kind of Resident Evil style urgency in the inventory management. The difference between this game and Resident Evil, and the combat's fun. And you can run away from enemies. You can't do that here. You need bullets, you need guns, you need weapons. Oh, it's just, you have no inventory space. You have to make a choice between having items you can sell for upgrades, having bullets, or having healing items. Majority of the time until you get your first upgrade, which is a long way into the game, you have to make choices between what you can carry, and you cannot go back and collect things you left behind. I cannot emphasize that enough. It is terrible design when paired with the fact that the melee is so bad. I can't tell you how bad the melee is. And yeah, the inventory management is an issue because you just don't want to fight melee. You don't want to do any of that. You just rather shoot enemies. Now you can use the grav gun to kill enemies, but that's only in certain rooms that have these randomly protruding spikes everywhere. It remains satisfying for the whole playthrough. It's not something that is always the most reliable thing in the world. And also the rate at which you get credits just seems a bit odd. You end up getting absolutely nothing for like 70% of the game, then an absolute mountain of credits towards the end. I would have liked to have seen that spread out more so you could have more options, maybe even a more powerful weapon to help with the sponginess, more bullets to help with the sponginess, and just help you thin out the herd when you're facing multiple enemies. Like if you know your game's got an issue with the camera, with multiple enemies, with lock-on, give the players some tools, more bullets, just to, you know, hide, maybe to mask the issue would be a smart idea. It seems like the developers here just wanted you to know how bad melee system was and then hammer it over your head for 12 hours. Do you need to heal? Yeah. The sound cues where the enemies are coming from are terrible. I mean, you really don't know where they're coming from. They throw enemies in your blind spot all the time with no you know, idea that the healing requires an animation. So you can get interrupted in that animation all the time. Oof. It's such a shame because I actually really like the premise. Anyway, moving on to the next issue with the gameplay, and that's enemies. I mean, the issue is there's about 4 enemies in the game, and they all have the same attack. That's all there is really to say there. it's crazy. They're literally all the same, and one has a blue shirt on. You find the same mini-boss 4 times. There's one boss in the game, it's the last boss, and you have a mini-boss who you fight, who is awful. Talking about enemies, we have the mini-boss who is, I mean, I'm not joking when I say he's a monster that has one punch, not like the cool one punch like One Punch Man. He has one punch, and you can keep, it doesn't even matter what direction you press, keep hold of right or left, you'll auto dodge and you just shoot him. That is the boss. That is the same boss with the same skin 4 times, arguably a mini boss. And then we have the final boss, who is just what? The final boss is a long dodging game, and then finally you just shoot him in the head, run away, play like Ring of Roses. He doesn't get close to you, and then you basically have to go around smashing ammo boxes, picking up ammo, hoping he doesn't animation lock you in the animation that'll kill you, and picking up ammo and shooting him and pot shotting him, and then eventually he dies when you throw. These enemies spawn that you can kind of throw at him, throw the enemies out with the grav gun, hope you don't run out of ammo, hope you don't run out of mana, and that's that. I mean, there is no boss. I mean, just the combat. Sorry to sound like a broken record. The combat is terrible. Okay, just be all and end all. Enemies have way too much health. Combat is too samey due to the grav gun's limited uses. It's only really useful in areas where there's giant spikes sticking out of the wall, and even then, in a lot of the levels, if you use that, you alert the enemies. You just the grav gun is a nice idea, looks cool in the trailer. I'd love to know how much people actually used it. The game being so pretty does make you want to push forward though and push through the bad combat. Basically, you enjoy everything in this game as like an experience other than the gameplay. On to our next issue, you'd be delighted to know, which is puzzles. Yeah, and your main job in this game is to turn the electricity on everywhere, and I think that's why you probably ended up going to this jail, this whole prison in the first place, was just to turn the power back on, because that's all I seem to be doing. Hey man, you gotta go to this you gotta go to the shoe and turn the power back on, and you gotta go to the medical center and you gotta turn the power back on. And by the way, if you go to the research facilities, you just oh yeah, you gotta turn the power back on. Puzzles, yeah. What puzzles? In this game, there's one puzzle. That is removing a fuse from one fuse box and planting that fuse in another fuse box. And that's puzzles done for today, everybody. Honestly, the mission structure is so dated. It's fuse box or find a key card. Boom, done. There's your puzzles. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. Again, it just makes the melee issue, the combat issue worse because there's no variety. There's no break-in variety. There's not even an attempt to break in variety. Moving on to weapon switch. Like I mentioned before, the weapon switching is awful. I showed you the clip. Good luck switching the weapons, by the way, in some of the boss fights, especially the main one, which is split in 2 parts. But yeah, good luck with that. Then level design. I don't like the criticism of linear games. Like, I don't mind a linear game. The issue here is your inventory is really small. You can't pick up everything. So what would be nice is, if you do get to one of the kind of shops in the game, not like a microtransaction shop, you basically buy it with things you find, you buy items and you buy upgrades. But if you went there and let's say spent some of the things in your inventory or sold them to create currency, you can then go back in the level, pick up what you left and come back. You can't do that a lot of the time. The levels just shut off. The door's just locked, mostly because you've probably removed the fuse box from the door and you can't go back. So you just leave behind loads of items. And you know what annoys you so much is that you're there smacking 100 enemies with a metal bar when you've left behind like about 500 bullets behind the door. That's literally just there staring you in the face. It's just like everything's been an afterthought on the gameplay front. Everything they did was to make the game look good in the trailer and just graphically blow your mind. Also, small niggles, checkpoints. Again, I'm gonna sound like I'm repeating myself. The combat's so bad, but then you have 10 waves of enemies. You die on, let's say, the 7th. They put you all the way back to the first wave, but not only that. What they end up doing is they make you collect all the items in the room before that wave of enemies. It doesn't remember you. It doesn't start you at the fight. It starts you in the room before the fight. So you got to collect everything again. See, it's just little things like that the game has issues, but there's things like that could have easily been avoided. Remember what I picked up in the room if you're going to restart me there. Don't make me go back and have to recollect everything in the room. It's the little things that, it's small things. They niggle. All these things, they niggle at you because it's such a frustrating game to play. Callisto Protocol is stunning, it's atmospheric, and the level of detail in its tight corridors have to be seen to be believed, but it does not detract from a cumbersome and repetitive gameplay experience that just feels so clumsy and disjointed. The horror elements are practically non-existent outside of the first hour, where sadly they use the same bag of tricks to keep trying to instill some kind of fear in the player, and it fails miserably. Saying all that though, despite all my criticisms, despite the fact that I've basically been ripping into this game for the last 10 minutes, I didn't overall hate my experience in Callisto Protocol. I know that makes no sense. When the game is so immersive, when it looks so realistic, when the animations, when the storytelling, even though the story's basic, when it's done in such a way that it really just feels like you are there, it's hard to say that you don't enjoy it because you are being transported into that world via the incredible graphical fidelity, which I have to mention again is really otherworldly. There's a bunch of things that hurt the overall product and they all kind of come together in the end to really knock it down a few pegs. The lack of interconnectivity in the levels, the inability to go back and explore, the lack of any variety, the lack of any set piece bosses, the questions to be asked about replayability. There's no NG Plus yet. It is coming in a patch, but why on earth you'd want to play this game on NG Plus is beyond me. The combat is just so bad and it's only going to get tougher in NG Plus. Now, as I said, saying all that, the potential is clearly there for Callisto Protocol to be an incredible IP. It's just such a shame to see it wasted on the first run through. It does feel rushed out. I think another year in development would have helped this game so much. And the tweaking of the combat, the mechanics, the enemy variety, even just a couple of boss fights that really give you something to remember, really would have put this game over the top. For me, the game just has too many flaws for me to give it a good mark. I'd love to give it a good mark. I want to give it a good score. But really, when you're being fair and you're being impartial about a game, you just have to say, in terms of the core video gaming experience, it's poor here. Yes, it's a technical marvel. Yes, it's engrossing. Yes, it's atmospheric. But it's not a horror game, and it's not a very good game at that. So I'm feeling a light to decent 6 for Callisto Protocol, and I've not even touched upon the shocking PC performance on day one, as well as a couple of bugs, you know, that I've already mentioned. They were there, but that's it really. It's such a shame. I think it could have been something truly special. As it is, it probably right now is going down as my most disappointing game of the year. Anyway, that's my Callisto Protocol review. Final Fantasy Crisis Core begins next week. Like, subscribe, help me out, and let people know about the review. Take care.
Yo!